What's good, Internet? My name is Attack Slug, and welcome to my Postmortem for the My Career mode in WWE 2K18. If this is your first time on the channel, I've been playing video games since 1985. I've been watching wrestling since 1994. I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but I've been around for a while. So let's get started on the things I liked about My Career and the much larger things I didn't like about this year's My Career. And if you think this game is the best and perfect and whatever else, and you hate hearing people complain about things both small and large, then maybe don't watch this video. All I'm trying to say. So, let's begin. First and foremost, I understand the realities of putting together a video game in like a 9-month schedule. Year to year to year, every single year. Believe me, I get it. You don't have the luxury of a 2-year or 3-year dev cycle. That being said, this video is specifically about My Career, so the larger game has other issues. Animation bugs, glitches, things that are in there every year, new things that have happened in this year's. This video specifically is about the My Career. And overall, I thought compared to last year, compared to the year before, compared to the year before, they did better. The idea here is sound. The structure, the overall structure is generally sound. You're taking elements from Shut Your Mouth, you're taking elements from Here Comes the Pain, and you're modernizing it in a way, and that's a great idea. The problem is, it just didn't get done well enough. It's just the overall execution of what you're trying to do definitely fell way short. First and foremost, and this is a personal opinion, I think the free-roaming backstage is kind of unnecessary. It's tedious, and unfortunately, there's no real unpredictability to what you encounter backstage. And honestly, I thought in Shut Your Mouth, the backstage free roam was tedious. You walk around the same concourse, you find kind of a handful of superstars, and things could happen, but getting there just took forever. Contrast that to Here Comes the Pain, where you had a menu of different locations that were backstage, and you could see who was in those locations, and you could choose where to go. You only had a limited choice, and it could be a fight, it could be a, different event. You never really knew what you were going to get, and that unpredictability made it great. Now, the story itself in this My Career was kind of an average, bland, I'm going to get the belt, I'm going to get double-crossed, but no, I'm going to leave and come back and get the belt again. Like, it's been done. It's definitely something I could see happening on TV over the course of a few months, but that doesn't make it good. There have been plenty of bland storylines on actual WWE TV in the past several years, and I can just watch those. So here's the thing, though: you're in a video game, so you're outside of the creative bounds of having to be constrained to what you can do in real life. Now, I don't know if these storylines have to get approved by WWE, and I'm not saying you need to have helicopters and Times Square and all that stuff. It'd be nice. But there are definitely ways to have more creative storylines without revolving around the same handful of things. Nobody got hit by a car. Like, that's the old standby. And again, you only had like 9 months to make this game or whatever it was, and having to craft a bunch of new cutscenes might have been too much work, but at the same time, like, you want people to like this thing, right? I would say my largest issue overall, and as was very apparent by my t-shirt in the video game, was the inclusion of your progression being locked behind loot boxes. And your tagline for the game was, "Be like no one." Except everyone kind of had the same limited choices of moves and outfits, because all the stuff you really wanted was locked behind these damn loot boxes. And when they first announced Road to Glory, they go, alright, Road to Glory, and it has loot boxes. And I was hoping that would be completely separate from the My Career. Because if you kept it in its own mode, I wouldn't even care. But by locking My Career and Road to Glory as part of the same character, and then having that all lock stuff behind loot boxes and make you grind for it, and also pay you a pitiful amount of VC to grind for these loot boxes, was just a bad decision all around. And please, 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 if you go the route of NBA, pay close attention to what happened to EA when they lost $3 billion in their stock prices. Don't mess around with this stuff. Seriously. Now, moving on to the actual dialogue in the My Career mode. Good God. I have to wonder how much of that actually went through someone who natively spoke any English. So much of it seemed very much machine translated and polished up a little bit. Look, I know that Yuke's is based in Japan, but the thing with wrestling, and the thing with WWE specifically, is you have so many colorful characters. You have so many big, giant personalities, and so much of the dialogue in this game was either bland or repetitive or both. There were a handful of lines that actually made sense. Bray Wyatt had some, Roman Reigns had some, Dean Ambrose had like one that he kept saying over and over again. But it made it kind of pointless to walk around and talk to anybody backstage when they never had anything fun or good to say, and you weren't going to fight them, so why bother? So perhaps that was another time constraint thing where they just didn't have time to write as much dialogue or translate it properly. I don't know. It just wasn't good. And I've been saying for a while now, remove all of the spoken dialogue, have it just be text, and then you can make it what it should be. But they kind of went halfway there and then not all the way. But in terms of talking and getting onto talking, there were way too many promos. And to be fair, I think that the Promo Engine 2.0 is way better than last year. You can actually kind of find a through point and build a combo on how you want to make that point. You know, yeah, all right, here's where I think the through line is, and I'm going to go and choose these options and hopefully build that combo and build a cohesive promo. That was good. Kudos there. But holy crap, there were a lot of them. It's like they took all the complaints that there was too much wrestling in last year's game and removed most of that wrestling. There were, you know, a lot of promos, a lot of backstage brawls, and not that many actual matches in the ring. But also when it comes to promos, and also when it comes to the backstage dialogue and the superstars, there's no real logical consistency in a lot of this stuff. For example, you get to a certain point and you can choose a manager. But then if your manager happens to be backstage, like mine was Alexa Bliss, and you talk to her, she'll just spit out the same line of dialogue and not ever mention that she's your manager. That's not a hard thing to fix. And just a small thing, but again, an important thing, when you've won Money in the Bank, when you've won a title, and you spend so much time walking around that same hallway backstage, why aren't you carrying your Money in the Bank or your title? Why, when you go out to the ring to cut a promo, are you not wearing your title? There is a certain logic in wrestling, and when you break that logic, it totally ruins the suspense of disbelief. Now, perhaps a limitation of this game engine and having to load in everything to make things happen, but good God, there are a lot of load screens and load times in this game in between just about every action you do. With the exception, I did like you're going to have a fight backstage and you hit a button to fight the guy and it immediately goes into that fight. That works fine. But everything else, the Renee Young interview, having to go to the next day, having to load into the match, like there's just so many different load screens. Now moving on to the quest system, right? You got your main quests and your side quests. And personally, I'd seen a handful of those side quests be broken. Now granted, I'm playing in the first 2 months and oh, wait for the patches, and I'm like, it's been 2 months. I play like 100 games a year and most of them aren't this broken. So for example, had a side quest to go call out Luke Gallows in a promo. I go to call him out. Who shows up in the ring? Braun Strowman for a promo. I go back to the backstage to discuss things with Kalisto, and I'm like, man, Seth Rollins, how did he know? Luke Gallows to Braun Strowman to Seth Rollins. And I'm like, what? Randy Orton comes out to save me from a tag team attack. I go backstage, and Brock's like, man, a tack slug saved your ass. And I'm like, I'm a tack slug, Brock. What are you talking about? These are very simple things to fix that would create overall a much better experience. But speaking of the side quests, right? When you're on a side quest, then it totally sidetracks, like it becomes your main quest. Because when you're on a side quest and you're the champion, you don't defend your belt at the pay-per-view, which is usually how things work. Obviously, Brock is his own thing, and Brock shows up when Brock wants to. And there have been a handful of times where The Miz, being the IC champ, didn't defend his title at pay-per-view. But generally, overall, if you're the champion, you defend your belt at the pay-per-view. Side quest or not, that should happen regardless. There is an internal logic to wrestling. Stop messing with that logic. It makes things really obvious when you screw it up. Now, there were a handful of other things that I didn't actually experience myself, One of which after Mania, when you have a thing with Matt Bloom, and that totally just breaks the game completely, and you can't progress. Or when you take a side quest from a woman, and then it wants you to fight her, but obviously if you hit her, you get disqualified because that's how things work, and then you can't finish that quest, and you're stuck doing that forever. But I also had one time where Alicia Fox wanted to challenge me for the IC belt, and I'm like, you're not in the same division, like this is not hard. Somewhere in your code should be a checkbox saying, hey, is this a woman? Then she shouldn't say this because she can't challenge me ever because that's not how it works. Now the translation kind of got some folks messed up on that Money in the Bank objective, and that's kind of just, again, better translation would have fixed that problem entirely. But when it comes to the main missions, right, they took a Day of Reckoning approach here, where you have to pass, or you keep on retrying and retrying and retrying until you do. As opposed to a Shut Your Mouth or Here Comes the Pain, where if you had failed, then the story branches off. It goes in a different direction. Hey, you didn't do it. Tough luck. Let's go a different direction. So basically, there's no consequence here for failure. The first time I played through Here Comes the Pain, I didn't end that game with the good ending because I didn't capture the title at WrestleMania. This game already has the ability that if you failed a match, when you hit next, there's an option for retry. So why not, if you fail and you want to see where it goes otherwise, then let the person fail and branch it into a different story. But I guess the larger problem there is that there is no unpredictability in this game pretty much at all. Like, there were a handful of choices, like, alright, choose your tag team partner, that was alright. Choose what brand you want to be on, choose to be a face or a heel, basically, a fan favorite or a company man, and those are fine. But it seems that, like, overall, generally, it plays out pretty much the same anyway. Like, if you're gonna get into a backstage brawl, you kind of already know you're gonna get into that backstage brawl. Either you have the mission to go start that fight, or you're in a Renee Young interview and someone fights with you, or things along those lines. Whereas the other games, it was like, alright, I'm gonna go talk to Eddie. And if I choose the wrong dialogue option, then we fight. Like, that's unpredictability. You don't know. It's like if you're already not really writing specific dialogue for each superstar, then you can totally interchange whatever superstar happens to be in that mission, in that story. It doesn't always have to be the same ones every single time that you play the game. As far as I can tell, even though this game does show you a superstar shakeup, the brand split stuff didn't matter at all. Like, there's supposed to be a brand split, it's supposed to be Raw and SmackDown, but the game completely ignores that. My tag team partner was Randy Orton, who at the time was the SmackDown World Champion. I see Brock Lesnar backstage at Raw all the freaking time when he was the SmackDown World Champion. Like, what's the point of having a brand split if you don't actually adhere to the brand split? What's the point of showing you this superstar shakeup screen if it doesn't actually mean anything? So again, the structure you built here can be good. The structure you built can make for a good wrestling game. You just didn't go all the way with it. And hey, maybe next year. But again, next year also might have microtransactions and more loot boxes. So I don't have a lot of faith there. Additionally, your match booking and your backstage dialogue don't really, it seems like it's two different people having two different conversations. Because it's like, alright, I go beat Dean Ambrose. I go take his title. And I see him backstage, and he has the same exact line of dialogue. No, hey, I'm getting that belt back, or no, hey, I hate you, or no, hey, backstage fight because he's mad he took his belt. None of that. Just completely, it's like it never even happened. Again, you need to have a logical through line here. But also, as far as I can tell, there's no actual rematch clause. Like when you beat a guy and get his belt, that seems to be it. I guess if he was still your rival, it'd be fine. But I beat Joe at Mania, and he challenged me at Payback, but you can just say no. And I'm like, that's not how it works. In wrestling, you lose your belt, and you have a rematch clause that is set in stone. Unless, of course, you get sent to a different brand, or fired, or whatever. The bottom line here is that I like wrestling, and I like video games. And there can be good wrestling video games. There have been great wrestling video games. But 2K in the past several years seems like they don't really understand what makes a good wrestling video game. Or they just don't have the time and the resources to actually make that happen. And yet every year their PR department says, oh, it's the most realistic and it's the most comprehensive, and anyone who actually watches wrestling and understands how wrestling usually works is going to play through my career and be like, that's not how wrestling works. Believe me, I want these games to be good way more than you guys do, because I just want to make entertaining videos for people to watch. And better games mean more entertaining videos, right? So that was my 2K18 MyCareer post-mortem breakdown. If you made it this far, you're awesome. And if you happen to work for 2K, which they do follow me on Twitter, so that is entirely possible, I'm not saying all these things to be mean. I'm not saying all these things to hate on what you're doing. I'm saying them because I want better wrestling video games. But I'm also not naive enough to believe all of the PR things before the game comes out, because I actually play other video games that cost the same price and are way better. And I know I've been barking up this tree for quite some time, but just putting it out there. If you had more than one development team working on 2K19, 20, 21, whatever, and you gave that team a full 2 years to make a game, and those teams would leapfrog each other with 2 years, you would have way better video games. And I know these games, because they're licensed games from a licensed property, are going to sell the same regardless. So it's not really worth putting more money into them, because you're still going to get the same return. But good God, if you keep going down this same broken pathway, eventually those sales will drop off. I would hope. Eventually, enough folks are going to wake up to how broken these games are every year. Or perhaps that's just wishful thinking on my part. Anyway, I'm a Tax Slug. Thank you for watching. More videos every day, something new tomorrow. And we'll see you next time, right here on this channel. And I'm out.